Corcoran Prison. The gates clang shut, echoing through the valley. Inside these walls, the most dangerous men in America walk free within a prison. Jamie Osuna sits in a shadowed cell, tattoos snaking up his arms, a cold smirk etched across his face. Just days ago, he attacked another inmate, a brutal display of raw, unfiltered rage. Nearby, Efren Saldivar, known as the Angel of Death, waits silently. Nurses once trusted him, patients once depended on him, but behind these walls, his hands are stained with the lives of those he once vowed to save. Bintai Luke paces his cell, muttering about the family he destroyed, a massacre that left the town reeling. Gerald Parker sharpens a makeshift blade with an intensity that makes even the guards uneasy. And through the dim corridor, the hum of security cameras records every glance, every gesture, every silent plan for the chaos that may erupt at any second. This is Corcoran, where blood-stained pasts meet cold concrete, and the cases these men represent are nightmares no one dares to reopen. But tonight, the silence is thick. Something is about to snap. A fight? An escape attempt? Or worse, a confrontation between some of the most infamous killers ever confined together. And the question lingers. Which of these men will lose control first, and what horrors will unfold inside these walls? If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content. Corcoran Prison. Behind its high concrete walls, the most dangerous men in America are caged, but the violence inside is far from contained. Jamie Osuna is one of them. Tattoos cover his forearms like warning signs, snarling wolves, jagged lettering, threats etched in ink. He doesn't just fight. He attacks with a ferocity that leaves even hardened inmates shaken. 1 week ago, he ambushed a man in the cell block. Teeth were broken, blood flowed freely, and Osuna didn't stop until guards dragged the victim away. The attack was pure rage, calculated yet chaotic, leaving an unmistakable mark of Osuna's brutality. Across the corridor, Efren Saldivar moves quietly, almost invisible. But behind the calm, meticulous exterior is a killer who once took lives under the guise of care. As a respiratory therapist, he murdered patients who trusted him to keep them alive. In Corcoran, that same cold efficiency manifests in small, terrifying ways. He studies other inmates, calculating, patient, ready to strike when he sees weakness. It's not just strength, it's a deliberate, clinical cruelty that makes people uneasy. Bintai Luke is a different kind of terror. He destroyed an entire family with his own hands. In Corcoran, that same cold, methodical brutality continues. Luke's eyes scan every corner of the cell block, calculating his next move. He hums quietly, a lullaby that carries the weight of murder. Fellow inmates steer clear, guards remain alert. Luke's violence isn't impulsive, it's a storm waiting for the moment to break, and everyone knows it. Then there's Gerald Parker. Tattoos run down his arms, symbols of past pain and warning. He is quiet, but lethal. Parker doesn't need to fight often. His presence alone is enough to command fear. The stories of his past assaults echo through the prison halls. In his hands, even a small blade becomes an instrument of control, a tool to remind everyone who walks the halls that he is capable of horrors that make hardened criminals flinch. The prison corridors echo with tension. Every footstep, every glance, carries the weight of history. Osuna smirks when he sees Saldivar pass, as if daring him to act. Saldivar's eyes narrow but reveal nothing. Luke hums a low tune, pacing carefully. Parker leans back in the shadows, observing, calculating, waiting. These men do not need weapons to terrify. Their past, their reputations, and the sheer intensity of their brutality speak for them. Then, without warning, the metallic clang of the main cell block doors erupts down the hallway. A fight has broken out in another block. Shouts, screams, the crash of metal against metal, a symphony of chaos. Jamie Osuna's jaw tightens. He is ready. Saldivar straightens, silent but alert. Luke stops pacing, listening, plotting. Parker grips the edge of his bunk, ready for what comes next. Inside Corcoran, violence is never far away. And tonight, it hangs heavier in the air than ever before. The sounds fade, leaving an uneasy quiet. But nothing has changed. The tension remains thick, unbroken. These men, Osuna, Saldivar, Luke, Parker, are living reminders of the brutality that brought them here. Every movement, every glance, carries potential for bloodshed. And behind those walls, the next act of violence is always waiting, ready to erupt without warning. Who will strike first? Who will show the depth of their cruelty? Inside Corcoran, brutality is not a past. It is the present, alive in every heartbeat, in every shadow, in every tattooed arm. The walls of Corcoran Prison seem to absorb the weight of every violent act committed inside. Some men are quiet, some are explosive, but a select few carry reputations so dark, even the most hardened inmates flinch in their presence. Among them are Horace Van Valtz, Rodney Alcala, Juan Corona, and Mikhail Markasev, each a name tied to chilling acts of murder and manipulation, each carrying tattoos that mark them as warriors in their own brutal worlds. Horace Van Valtz moves through the corridor with a predator's awareness. His body is covered in jagged tattoos, symbols of the chaos he has sown in his life. Van Valtz is not loud. He doesn't boast. His reputation precedes him. In Corcoran, he watches the weaker men, calculating. He waits for a moment to strike, a look, a word, a glance that could end in violence. Inmates whisper about his murders outside. Young women abducted and killed, lives extinguished without mercy, and they keep their distance. The air thickens whenever he enters a room. His presence alone is a threat. Rodney Alcala, the infamous dating game killer, occupies a corner of the dayroom, tattoos visible on his forearms and shoulders, inked symbols as dark as his crimes. He smiles often, a chilling contrast to the weight of his past. He has killed women with cold precision, charming them before luring them to death. In Corcoran, Alcala's charisma is a weapon. He manipulates, provokes, and tests the limits of anyone foolish enough to meet his gaze. Guards respect him for one reason. His mind is as dangerous as his hands. Juan Corona paces the narrow hallways, hands clasped behind his back. His tattoos are subtle but foreboding, symbols that reflect the lives he ended on the farms of California decades ago. 25 farm workers murdered, men whose lives were extinguished in bursts of brutal force, is a shadow that follows him into Corcoran. Unlike others, Corona does not rely on outward aggression. He is methodical, calculating, waiting for moments of weakness. But the aura of menace that radiates from him is unmistakable. In the yard, inmates keep distance. In the cells, whispers pass from one block to another about the quiet horror Corona represents. Mikhail Markasev is younger, but his notoriety is no less terrifying. He murdered Ennis Cosby, son of comedian Bill Cosby, in a crime that shocked the nation. His tattoos tell the story of a violent upbringing, a life shaped by anger and rebellion. Inside Corcoran, he exhibits bursts of violence, slamming doors, striking walls, snapping at guards who approach too close. Markasev is impulsive, explosive, and dangerous, a volatile mix inside a prison already teeming with predators. The corridors are tense. Van Valtz watches Alcala across the hall, both silent but fully aware of each other's reputation. Corona glances from his cell, assessing patterns, movements, and reactions. Markasev paces back and forth, muttering under his breath. A single spark could ignite chaos. The violence that built these men, calculated or impulsive, lingers in every step, in every breath, in every silent stare exchanged in the dim halls of Corcoran. Suddenly, a commotion erupts near the yard. Inmates shout, a metal gate slams, and a guard yells for order. Van Valtz does not flinch. He thrives in tension. Alcala's smile flickers, observing how others react, studying for manipulation. Corona leans against a wall, poised and calculating, unaffected by the chaos. Markasev's energy spikes, fists clenching, eyes darting for an opportunity. The fight subsides, but the tension remains. Inside Corcoran, no violence is ever truly resolved. It simmers, waiting for a spark. These four men, Van Valtz, Alcala, Corona, Markasev, are living reminders of the brutality that brought them here. Guards keep their distance. Inmates avoid their gaze. And the prison itself seems to hold its breath, knowing that another storm is always ready to break. As night falls, The dim corridors grow darker, shadows stretching across walls and cell doors. Van Valtz traces the edges of his cell with his fingertips. Alcala hums a soft tune. Corona closes his eyes in quiet calculation, and Markasev slams his bunk in frustration. Each is trapped by walls, but free in their brutality. And in Corcoran, that is all that matters. The question hangs over the prison like smoke. When will their violence erupt next, and who inside these walls will survive it? Corcoran Prison is a place where reputations are forged in blood, and fear is currency. Among the most chilling inmates are men whose crimes shock the nation: Joseph James D'Angelo, Dana Ewell, Phil Spector, and Michael Jace. Each carries violence within them like a living pulse, visible in their tattoos, their eyes, their calculated movements. Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, is quiet but unmistakably lethal. Once a law enforcement officer, he turned predator, committing a spree of rapes and murders that terrorized California for over a decade. In Corcoran, he walks silently down the hallways, tattoos curling up his forearms and hands, a calm exterior hiding a mind built for meticulous cruelty. Other inmates give him space, respecting the fear that trails him. He doesn't need to strike to terrify. His past is enough to make hardened men flinch. Dana Ewell, younger but equally ruthless, carries the weight of his family murders with him. The twin murders of his parents and brother for inheritance left the world in shock. Inside Corcoran, that cold-blooded calculation continues. His eyes scan corridors constantly, watching for weakness, for opportunity. Ewell's tattoos snake across his arms, symbols of control, power, and warning. A single glance from him is enough to silence whispers in the cell block. Phil Spector, infamous music producer, sits in his corner with the same composed expression he once wore at recording studios. But behind the calm is a man who murdered his wife in cold blood. Tattoos on his arms are less about gangs and more personal symbols, yet they mark him as someone who has crossed the line into irrevocable violence. In Corcoran, he is unpredictable. He can be silent for hours, then flare with menace at the slightest provocation. Fellow inmates respect him and fear the volatility beneath the surface. Michael Jace, once an actor seen on television screens across the nation, now exists in this world of concrete and iron. He murdered his wife in a sudden, furious act that left shockwaves far beyond the prison walls. Tattoos mark his arms and chest, jagged designs, violent symbols, and letters spelling warnings for those who approach. In Corcoran, he is unpredictable, volatile, and dangerous. His temper flares with little warning, and his strength and anger make him a force that even seasoned guards watch closely. The prison corridors seem to bend under the weight of their reputations. D'Angelo passes silently, eyes cold and calculating. Ewell follows with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who trusts no one. Spector leans against the wall, silently observing, his presence commanding uneasy glances from nearby inmates. Jace paces back and forth, muttering under his breath, muscles tensing with barely restrained rage. Suddenly, the metal clang of the block doors reverberates, breaking the uneasy calm. A fight has erupted in another part of the prison. Shouts, the slam of doors, and cries of frustration fill the hallways. D'Angelo doesn't flinch. He thrives in quiet tension. Ewell's eyes narrow, anticipating weakness. Spector adjusts, observing reactions. Jace slams his fist against the wall, the violence in his body ready to spill over at the slightest spark. The commotion fades, but the air remains thick with the threat of violence. Inside Corcoran, no calm is permanent. The past of these men, murders meticulously planned, calculated, or sudden and furious, is never left behind. It is alive, manifesting in every glance, every movement, every silent stare. As night falls, shadows stretch across cell doors and corridors. D'Angelo sits in the corner of his cell, hands clasped, tattoos visible in dim light, eyes watching the hall. Ewell leans against the wall, quiet but alert. Spector hums softly, a tensioned tune, fingers tracing tattoos etched into his skin. Jace slams his bunk again, muscles tensed, waiting. Each is contained by walls, but not by restraint. Brutality thrives in the darkness of Corcoran. The question lingers in the air. In this prison of predators, who will ignite the next storm? and whose brutality will mark the next chapter of terror inside Corcoran. The deeper you go inside Corcoran Prison, the colder it feels. This is where men are no longer measured by strength alone, but by the weight of what they've done. In this wing, brutality is quieter, heavier, and more calculated. Sirhan, John Albert Gardner III, Paul Flores, and George Wayne Smith occupy this space. Men whose crimes reshaped public fear and still refuse to fade. Sirhan sits alone most days, shoulders hunched, tattoos barely visible beneath the folds of his uniform. He assassinated Robert F. Kennedy, altering American history with a single act of violence. Decades later, that same intensity lingers. Inside Corcoran, Sirhan's brutality is not loud, but ideological. His presence draws silence. Inmates don't approach him out of respect or fear. They avoid him because history itself follows him like a shadow. Guards watch him closely, knowing the mind that once changed a nation is still capable of sudden, unpredictable action. John Albert Gardner III is different. His violence was direct, cruel, and devastating. He murdered young girls, acts that hardened even veteran investigators. Inside Corcoran, Gardner's tattoos stretch across his arms like scars carved in ink. He keeps to himself, but his reputation precedes him. Other inmates sense the darkness he carries and keep their distance. When Gardner walks the corridor, conversations stop. His brutality wasn't a moment of rage. It was repeated, deliberate, and merciless. Paul Flores is housed separately, not because he lacks violence, but because of the attention his case still draws. The disappearance and death of Kristen Smart made his name infamous. Flores' brutality was hidden, slow, and sustained, not explosive, but consuming. In prison, that same energy follows him. He avoids eye contact, keeps his head down, but tension clings to him. His tattoos are crude, etched reminders of control and secrecy. Other inmates whisper when he passes. Not all brutality leaves visible scars. George Wayne Smith carries himself like a soldier. Tattoos mark his arms, symbols of loyalty and violence tied to the Norco shootout that left multiple officers dead. His brutality was tactical, organized, and unflinching. In Corcoran, Smith walks with purpose, shoulders squared, eyes alert. He is respected by some, feared by others. Guards know better than to underestimate him. Men like Smith don't explode, they execute. The corridor grows tense as these men move through it. Sirhan remains silent, eyes forward. Gardner leans against the wall, watching. Flores keeps moving, avoiding confrontation. Smith pauses, scanning the block like a battlefield. For different forms of brutality, all contained within the same walls. Then the calm breaks. A sudden alarm cuts through the silence. A disturbance in a nearby unit sends guards rushing past. Doors slam. Voices echo. Smith straightens, alert. Gardner's jaw tightens. Flores freezes, then steps back. Sirhan doesn't move at all. The alarm stops, but the tension doesn't. Inside Corcoran, violence doesn't need action to exist. It lives in memory, reputation, and restraint barely holding. These men don't need to fight to dominate. Their pasts do it for them. As the lights dim, shadows stretch across the concrete. Sirhan sits unmoving. Gardner paces slowly. Flores stares at the floor. Smith watches the hallway. The prison settles, but the weight remains. Because in Corcoran, the most dangerous brutality isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits. And someone is always watching for the moment it doesn't have to anymore. The final wing of Corcoran Prison holds men whose names no longer shock. They warn. This is where violence is no longer impulsive or emotional. It is organized, remembered, and respected. Joe Pegleg, Morgan, Carrie Stainer, Rodney Alcala, and Juan Corona exist here not as ordinary inmates, but as living symbols of how far brutality can stretch across time. Joe Pegleg. Morgan moves slowly through the corridor, his presence heavy despite his physical limitations. Tattoos cover his arms and chest. Gang symbols, coded markings, silent messages understood by only a few. Morgan is not loud. He doesn't need to be. As a founding figure of the Mexican mafia, his brutality wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Violence followed his orders, not his hands. Inside Corcoran, that influence hasn't vanished. Inmates step aside when he passes. Guards remain cautious. His power is quiet, built on fear that never needed explanation. Cary Stayner carries a different kind of darkness. His crimes near Yosemite shock the nation, murders driven by compulsion, control, and deep psychological damage. In Corcoran, his tattoos trace chaotic patterns across his arms, a reflection of the fractured mind beneath. Stayner keeps to himself, but his unpredictability makes him dangerous. Other inmates watch him carefully. Violence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simmers behind stillness. Rodney Alcala reappears in this final stretch, not as a newcomer, but as a reminder. His brutality was deceptive, calculated, wrapped in charm. Inside Corcoran, that same manipulation lingers. He watches people. He studies reactions. Tattoos mark his arms like trophies of a past he never truly left behind. Alcala doesn't fight for dominance. He undermines it, quietly reminding everyone why he remains feared. Juan Corona, older now, moves with slow precision. His murders of farm workers left a scar across California's history. In Corcoran, he is treated like a relic of violence, not forgotten, but never underestimated. His tattoos are faded, but their meaning hasn't changed. Corona represents endurance, brutality that lasted long enough to become legend. The prison settles into a tense calm. No alarms, no shouting, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of boots on concrete. Morgan sits in silence. Stayner stares at the wall. Alcala watches. Corona rests his hands on his knees. Each man is contained, yet none are erased. This is the truth of Corcoran Prison. These walls don't end violence. They store it. They hold the weight of lives taken, families destroyed, and fear that refuses to fade. The cases tied to these men are rarely reopened, not because they lack importance, but because they reveal something uncomfortable. That brutality doesn't disappear when a sentence is handed down. As the lights dim and cell doors close, Corcoran becomes quiet again. But silence here is never peace. It is only pause. And somewhere behind these walls, history is still breathing. 19 men, one prison, countless lives changed forever. Corcoran Prison is not just a facility. It is a holding place for America's darkest chapters. These inmates are not myths. Their crimes are real. Their brutality left scars that time has not erased. And as long as these walls stand, the question remains: does justice end with confinement, or does the story continue long after the gates close? If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content.